Understanding the biomechanics of the squat may help you understand why someone may squat like this, or like this, or like this. It also might help identify limitations in movement that limit the mobility of the shoulders, the hips, and the spine. And the cool thing is that we can use mobility drills to improve each of the 3 phases of the squat. And we can use the squat combined with the breath to improve mobility throughout the body. If you are interested in learning more, keep listening because I'm going to break it down as simply as I possibly can. At the top of the squat, we need to be able to extend at the hip and allow for a little bit of a posterior orientation of the pelvis. We also need to be able to expand posteriorly in the thorax so we can achieve a more stacked or neutral position to start from. If we start in this position, it's going to allow us to have room to change our orientation into a little more of an anteriorly tilted and internally rotated position as we get down to the mid-range. But if we start our squat already in an extended position and a more flexion at the hip, and we have compression on the backside, as we descend down into the squat, we're going to start to hinge forward much sooner than if we started from our stacked neutral place. To get closer to the mid-range of the squat, we want to be able to create a more posteriorly rotated ilium position or internal rotation. This is going to allow for some adduction of the femur, and that's going to help open the pelvic outlet. So when we go down to the squat, in the mid-range, we want to feel like our sit bones are spreading apart to allow the femurs to glide back into the socket, open up the pelvic outlet, and create a concentric anterior pelvic floor that can push us out of that mid-range position. So this position can be really hard to achieve if we are stuck in a little bit more of an externally rotated position of the pelvis, because we are in more of an anteriorly tilted position, or because we have too much tension on the back side of the hip between the femur and the pelvis, or between the pelvis and the sacrum. And so considering exercises that help to open up this area, so when we descend down, we can get that nice opening on the backside to allow for our spine to have a nice neutral curve versus having to overly tuck to get down in that position, or overly extend and not being able to go down to that mid-range position fully. Once we get past that mid-range, things change a little bit out of the pelvis. We need to be able to go back into this externally rotated position, which is going to allow the sacrum to counter-nutate. That's going to allow for a little more flexion at the lumbar, and we need to have significant amount of posterior expansion of the thorax to allow us to move back into that space. Our shin angle is going to decrease. We're going to posteriorly orient our entire pelvis underneath us. That's going to really open the pelvis up nice and wide, and there's max pressure pushing down on the pelvic floor. So as I go down at this mid-range, I'm opening, creating space here, and then as I get all the way down, I have to be able to posteriorly orient. You can see as I rock back, my shin angle comes back slightly. I've got flexion throughout my spine, and I've got to have the ability to posteriorly expand through the thorax. For this elevated Nordic plank, I'm going to start with my toes on the wall so I can drag my toes up to get some hamstrings on board to help pull my pelvis underneath me into that little bit of that posterior tilt to get the hip extension I need in the front. I'm going to place a bench or a chair in front of me, and I'm going to place my elbows out on the bench. So depending on your level, you can back a little bit further closer to the wall to make it slightly easier, or a little further out, and that's going to depend on how much shoulder flexion feels comfortable for you. So I'm going to hold this position, and I'm going to push away from the bench, so I've got some ability to expand into my back. I'm going to drag my toes up the wall, create a small posterior tilt, so I've got some flexion in the lumbar, and I'm going to hold this position and take an inhale in, exhale, trying to find the deep abdominals. I'm going to keep a little tension there, still dragging the toes up the wall. Take an inhale in, exhale, find the deep abs. I want to repeat that for about 5 to 10 breaths, and I would do this for 2 sets to really see a difference. For this respiratory squat, I'm going to start with a plate or a 10-pound dumbbell, and I'm going to step with my feet on some wedges. I'm going to go ahead and raise the weight up in front of me. That's going to help me sort of shift my center of mass back onto my heels. In this position, I want to drop to my heels, soften my knees. I can even do a posterior tilt of the pelvis just slightly. And then as I go down, I'm going to reach out and take an inhale, and I'm going to stop before the mid-range. So I'm optimizing the posterior expansion here and my ability to orient the pelvis underneath me slightly and create some hip extension there. So I'm going to start here, take an inhale down, exhale up, inhale down, exhale up, inhale down, exhale up, and I'm going to repeat that for about 8 to 10 reps. As a regression for this exercise, we can hold on to our TRX or some rings or even onto the door handle. I'm going to sit back into my heels just like I did with the weight. I'm going to inhale and allow my knees to go forward as I drop straight down, keeping a little bit of a tuck there to optimize that posterior expansion. I'm going to stop before mid-range to my inhale, exhale, bring it back up. Drop it down, inhale, exhale, bring it back up, inhale, and exhale back up. Again, repeat that for 8 to 10 reps. For the bear plank with modified down dog, I'm going to start in a bear position. This is going to allow for my sit bones to lengthen. I don't want to tuck under in this position. I want to keep the sit bones like headlights shining toward the wall behind me. I'm going to push away so I'm still getting that expansion through the back. I'm optimizing the chest wall here as my scaps wrap around and connect with the posterior ribs, keeping the sit bones lifted. I'm going to hold this bear position and take an inhale. And then I'm going to exhale and lift my knees just off the ground. I'm going to hold this position, take an inhale. Exhale. I'm going to push back into a modified down dog. I'm still open with my sit bones as I push back. I'm going to hold this position, pushing away from the floor. Take an inhale. Exhale. I'm going to come forward into that bear position. If it's too hard to hold the knees up, you can drop them down. Take an inhale. Exhale. Move back into that down dog position. Inhale. Exhale, move into bear. Exhale, move back into that modified down dog. Take an inhale. Exhale, move forward into bear, keeping the sit bones lifted. Inhale. And you're going to repeat that for 5 reps in each position. For this mid-range squat with adduction, we're really working on using the adductors to help open up the pelvic outlet and allow for that expansion on the back of the hip and the back of the pelvis to happen. So I'm going to use wedges for this. I'm going to try to stay in the mid-range, and I'm going to do more of a 1.5 squat here so I can really optimize that position. I'm actually going to grab a weight because it's a little bit easier. I'm going to place the block between my knees, and depending on your comfort level in terms of width, you can place the block like this to have a little bit of a wider stance, or you can place it right between the knees like I'm doing. So I'm going to hold the weight in front of me. I'm going to get a little squeeze on the block. I'm going to drop down into the squat, allowing my sit bones to stay lifted. I'm going to inhale as I go down. I'm going to exhale halfway, squeezing the block as I exhale. Inhale down again. Exhale all the way up. Shake it out, reset. I'm going to inhale down, squeeze the block. Exhale, squeeze. Inhale down. Exhale, squeeze. And you're going to repeat that for 6 to 8 reps. This is one of my favorite exercises for creating some posterior expansion. It feels really good on the spine, and we're getting into a deep squat position, and we're going to take a big inhale in that position to help with that flexion and the posterior orientation of the pelvis. So I'm going to start in a little bit of a squat position. I'm going to take my inhale here, full exhale out, and then I'm going to inhale as I roll back, and exhale up, hold. Inhale here, Exhale out. Inhale back. Hold. Take that inhale and exhale again. Inhale back. And then repeat that for about 10 times. If you're still working on getting down into those deeper ranges of the squat and you can't come up in the squat position, you can focus on just inhaling here, exhaling up to the short seated position, hold, raise your arms just a little bit, take an inhale, exhale, rock it back, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. So as you gain more posterior expansion over time, the hope would be able to get into that good posterior orientation. So if you're feeling ready, we can start to work on going from that low position of the squat to the mid-range position and work on what it feels like to have that pelvis change. Typically, this can require a little bit more increase in dorsiflexion as you get to the bottom of that mid-range and your knees are still really forward. So if you want to use higher wedges, that can definitely help. So I'm gonna grab my weight and I'm gonna go ahead and set up on my wedges. I'm gonna start by going all the way down into the squat and take an inhale at the bottom. So I'm just kind of resting here with my arms in front. I'm gonna take my inhale, and then I'm gonna exhale, come up to mid-range, and I wanna feel like I have some space between my sit bones so they're lifted, and then I'm gonna let myself come back down, take my inhale, exhale, feel the sit bones lifted and spread. Inhale down. Exhale. Mid-range. So you can repeat that for about 6 to 8 reps. And for any of these squat activities, if you're struggling with the weighted version, you can grab your TRX and practice the mid-range and the low range with the TRX until your body gains those new movement capabilities. And then you can start to add the load in. So you're probably wondering, how do I program these things in? Where do I start and how do I move forward? So as with everything, it depends because everybody's different in what their body is capable of at any one moment. So what I suggest is starting with that upper range. It can never hurt to just master getting that posterior expansion, staying a little more upright, gaining some hip extension. So you can start with there for as long as you like. Then when you feel really confident, if you start to go down into the mid-range and you find yourself hinging forward excessively a little bit early, you might not be ready to be in that position in terms of staying in a stack and working on creating new movement options. But if you can get down in that mid-range, you can stay fairly upright, you feel confident, you can keep those sit bones lifted, then absolutely start working in that mid-range. Use the mobility drill, the bear to modified down dog, combined with both the mid-range squat and the upper squat, and you can do that for a while and kind of get used to it. For some people, that's all you need to get to, and going just to that mid-range is enough. But if you want to get all the way down to the ground and start working those lower ranges, then you can go to that rock and roll, to that short-seated position, or rock and roll to that low squat, and you can just learn to gain some mobility there. And you can continue with all the other ranges as well, but then start to load into that lower range and practice that pelvis change, allowing the sit bones to lift back up to that mid-range. And then once you've gotten really good at all of that, you can try to put it all together as one mobility drill. So if you're feeling confident in all the ranges, give this 3-stop respiratory drill a try. So I'm gonna step back up on my wedges. I'm gonna go ahead and bring my weight in front of me, sit back on my heels. I'm gonna drop down just about 1/3 of the way and take an inhale. I'm gonna exhale, drop to mid-range. I'm gonna pause, making sure my sit bones are lifted, body's still upright. I'm gonna take another inhale. I'm gonna exhale all the way down to the bottom, take another inhale. I'm gonna exhale back to mid-range. Take a full inhale. Exhale about 1/3 of the way from the top, take an inhale. Make sure I'm pushing back in space. Exhale, reset. Let's go through it again one more time together. I'm gonna sit back on my heels. I'm gonna tuck under slightly. I'm gonna drop 1/3 of the way and take an inhale. I'm gonna exhale to that mid-range, let my sit bones lift. Inhale, hold. Exhale all the way down. Inhale, hold. Exhale back to the mid-range, sit bones lifted. Inhale, hold. Exhale, a third from the top, slightly tucked, sitting back on those heels. Inhale. And exhale, relax. So if that felt okay, you can go for about 3 to 4 breaths. Take a breather. That's a killer.